Good afternoon, everybody. Pleasure to be here. A little bit of a panic yesterday because I haven't worn shoes for 18 months. And I've been wearing flip-flops and wellies for the last 18 months, and I couldn't find my shoes yesterday. So fortunately, I have managed to find them, and it's great to be here. So I'm Simon Page. I'm the Business Development Manager for Citrix at Arrow ECS, and Arrow ECS are EACS's distribution partner for Citrix. So it's a great pleasure to be here and hopefully give you an idea of what Citrix are up to in this new hybrid space. On the mic, sorry. So just, quick agenda. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of how work used to look. And then Michael's going to run you through sort of the new normal and how Citrix works around that, and he's going to run through a couple of demos with you. So once upon a time, we all used to commute to work and work in a corporate location. Lots of people around us. We didn't have to wear a mask. We didn't have to wash our hands every time we touched something, and we were able to get nice and close to each other. And I really remember those days, having banter with colleagues in the kitchen or around the water cooler, sneaking out for a sneaky pint at lunch and taking a customer out to lunch, and of course spending all day in the car, driving 200 miles for a 1-hour meeting and then coming home again. My last experience of actually being in an office, I was in the Citrix office just before lockdown, and I got a phone call from my line manager asking me where I was, which I thought was a little bit odd because, I was out at meetings all morning in our London office. I was over at Citrix. It wasn't as if there was nothing in my diary and she couldn't tell what I was actually up to that day. But she said to me, "Where are you?" And I said, "I'm in Citrix's offices in London." And she said, "Well, you need to leave. You need to go home." And that was the last time I actually physically stood or sat in a corporate office. And let's be honest, work has never looked the same since. Now I have a commute down the stairs every day. I have 20 Teams meetings every day. Lots of virtual meetings, lots of virtual whiteboarding, and obviously trying to keep the dogs quiet in the background has always been a bit of a challenge. But the point is that this is the new normal, and it's put a massive strain on IT infrastructure, and in particular security. We no longer sit within the confined walls of a physical building. We're all out and about everywhere. Whereas we used to have, those centralized applications and data, mobility was very much an edge case situation. We did have mobile workforces, but they were all logging in effectively with VPNs and multi-factor authentication. And that was okay at that point because it wasn't scaled out to the masses. But when we all moved into this weird phase where we all scrambled to work from home, it wasn't scalable, and it certainly wasn't secure. So I'll just wrap up a little bit there. So the hybrid model really is emerging, and it was emerging before, but it really needs to scale and be a lot more secure. And COVID has really pushed this into this hybrid model a lot faster than we were getting there. And effectively, I think what we've done, we've scrambled so fast and so hard to get to this point where we could all work from home. We've ended up duct taping solutions together, and that is not scalable going forwards. The new hybrid model is here to stay, and we need to do this a lot more sensibly and a lot more logically. So just a few numbers in terms of working from home. We can look at this pre-COVID, 63% there versus 36% weren't. And now, because of COVID, we're seeing that the workforce really went up to about 90% of working from home. Again, this just amplifies that even further. Pre and post-COVID, some bar graphs there of the workforce that has shifted towards home. And again, the likelihood is that at least 70% of us will continue to work from home in some way post-COVID. So just some security numbers there. 80% of businesses are concerned about security breaches. 74% of them see the need to build a new security framework, but 49% of them don't feel they have the skills or the know-how to prevent some of those DDoS, ransomware attacks, etc. And these challenges are existing, those security infrastructures. You know, we've got fragmented user authentication mechanisms. The VPNs, as I mentioned, they lack that granular access. We've got new threats from BYOD and unsanctioned applications and internet access, and security architectures that are not optimized for the hybrid workforce. As security remains a top-of-mind concern, as I said, 70% of IT leaders are worried about information and security being leaked. 54% say they've seen a spike in employees installing those unsanctioned applications, and 54% say that unscheduled virtual private network, personal network shutdowns have been a key problem for their department over the last few weeks. So the change is here to stay. We are in this new phase. We're coming out of the lockdown situation, but we are now in a very certain hybrid working environment, and the solutions need to come together and be a lot more sophisticated than the duct tape solutions that we've been using over the last 18 months. And don't forget that cloud conversation. We're seeing a huge shift, again, which has been accelerated by COVID, but a huge shift from on-prem to cloud services. Talk to your EACS account managers, because there is a massive opportunity for you guys to make that transition from on-premise to the cloud very simply and very financially beneficially. So please do talk to your EACS account managers. And I think that's it from me. Michael, I'm going to hand over to you.
Yep, for sure. Can you hear me all right? Just give me a thumbs up.
Yes.
Awesome, perfect. Interesting, this virtual physical combination. Quick introduction, because I lost audio initially, so I'm not sure if I was asked to introduce myself. But my name is Michael Gustaffson. I work as a domain specialist here at Citrix, and more specifically working on our Workspace Intelligence offering. So now that Simon kind of talked about where IT used to be and the challenges and kind of the direction of where we're going in, I want to talk about Citrix's view of what the new normal is going to be, pretty much. Where are we heading long term? So this is a message that you are very likely not to miss after today, right? The world is changing, or you could even say that the world has actually changed, right? And it has done so at a pace that we have essentially never seen before. It's changing faster than ever over the past 2 years, right? And the need to evolve and develop your IT environments and infrastructure is greater than ever before, right? And if you just think about the VPN use cases that Simon just mentioned, right? So a lot of organizations kind of adopted this solution of scaling those out to suit the work from home needs. But that, on the other hand, gave different challenges, right, when it comes to security and so on. And that's essentially because IT really did not have the capability to evolve at that rapid pace that the future is going to require, right? And we see wave after wave of new technologies, right? So Microsoft 365 is a very good example of that. The NSIX packaging and so on, right? So there's really a higher demand on IT than ever before. And I mean, in many industries, size really doesn't matter, right? And in fact, I mean, it's often the smaller companies that are more disruptive because they are not really burdened by that scale or the need to protect the legacy, right? So they are faster to change than ever before. And if we then try to summarize this a bit in one slide, you could essentially say that in the past, I mean, IT could very much use a castle and moat type strategy to protect their corporate assets, right? They could depend on workers essentially coming into the office using a assigned desktop that accesses resources in their network that is housed in their data center, right? But that really does not reflect how IT or what IT looks today, right? Employees are to a larger extent requiring to work from everywhere, right? So someone might have full segment or a full personal laptop they are working on. Others may be checking a report that lives on a web app somewhere that is hosted within the company data center on their tablet. And others may be just checking emails on their phones before boarding a flight, as an example, right? So that really has changed. The castle and moat type strategy is not going to be sufficient in the future, right? And many organizations are addressing these security concerns. This means by kind of requiring that any device that is accessing corporate resources has to be managed by the company, right? And this is quite impractical for many, of course. So organizations want to kind of offer that flexibility, including the ability to actually work from anywhere and from any device, but security kind of remains one of those top concerns around this, especially if the device is unmanaged, of course. So to kind of put all of this into one slide, you could say that the future is actually going to require any application, whether those are sanctioned or unsanctioned, to be available, right? I should not have to use jump stations or connect to a desktop somewhere in order to access a application. They should just exist and they should just work, right? And we should be able to work from any device, right? So whether those are managed or unmanaged should not really matter, right? What would be an ideal use case is, or an ideal scenario rather, is if we could make the device a bit less important, right? And remove the need to manage all of the devices and maybe just manage a subset of devices, but then still provide some type of secure access no matter what device you're trying to connect on. And of course, locations, right? So over the past 2 years, we've all been a part of this, right? So, I mean, the future is going to require you to be able to work from home, mobile offices, or in the office from your mobile when you're on the go. I mean, essentially everywhere, right? And you still need to have that good user experience, no matter where you are actually located. And that again kind of talks back to that VPN use case. That scalability of VPNs is not going to be sufficient for the future. And this is kind of where Citrix comes into the picture, where we provide a modern workspace. So I want to highlight some use cases for the secure access that we provide. So one of the very common use cases is, of course, remote access to intranet and web apps. Because again, I mentioned the VPNs is an issue, right? So why not have a solution where you can connect to internal apps without actually initiating that VPN, right? Again, to minimize the potential attack surfaces for hackers or malicious software that might reside on your device. And again, providing that contextual access with multi-factor authentication as well. So depending on what you're trying to access, when you're trying to access it, where you are trying to access it from, you should get different levels of access, of course. As well as securing access using bring your own and unmanaged devices, right? So we might want to do some different types of browser isolation to make sure that a device that the enterprise does not manage still can provide access to resources, but without risk to that specific app, right? As well as app protection policies. We want to make sure that you can't actually run keyloggers on a device or do screen capturing and that kind of things. And on the other hand of this, on the other side of things, this is not only about your traditional Windows apps, right? Because I mean, if you zoom out and think about what has happened in IT over the past years, there's also been a massive shift towards SaaS and web apps, of course. So you still need to provide access to those systems somehow, right? Even if federation is not in place and it might not even be supported initially by your company, but we still want to provide single sign-on and a very good user experience, even though these are SaaS and web apps, right? So Citrix Workspace can provide that unified access to all types of apps. And this is also something that I'm going to demo. If we then move on, I want to tie into a bit about what Steven said before in the session before us, right? Talking about the apps and what we need to do with the apps and kind of all of that. But why not also add the capability to abstract functionality from an app or a system into a single UI, entirely removing the need to actually virtualize or package or do anything with your app, right? And this is where Workspace Intelligence comes into the picture from Citrix. So we believe for the future, there's always going to be cases where employees have to access different systems and so on and do different simple types of workflows, But we don't want to force the users to actually open up the full app or open up a full system or connect into a desktop in order to open this. What we want to provide is the capability to abstract whatever's going on in that app or system, but into our UI, right? So simple tasks can actually be done directly in your workspace instead. And this is where micro apps comes into the picture. So a micro app is essentially a single use case that is made available to users from a complex enterprise application, right? And that shows in the UI instead. This also gives some additional capabilities, of course, because the micro apps and the Workspace Intelligence platform is actually intelligent as well. And as you can see on screen here, there's two different types, essentially. We have what's called the event-driven micro apps, which are actually intelligent in the way that we continuously check what's going on in different apps and different systems, right? So you might be checking what's going on in Salesforce, in ServiceNow, and some homegrown apps or systems, right? And then if something has changed and I as a user need to be notified of this, that's actually going to show up in my feed, right? So that's the event-driven part of this. And a good analogy is your Facebook feed, right? In your private life. The Facebook feed is essentially curated data that the algorithms deem relevant to you or based off of what you have accessed in the past. And that is pretty much exactly what we're trying to do with the event-driven micro apps. But then we also have the user-initiated micro apps. So these are static kind of micro apps where you might want to request PTO or submit a ticket or whatever the case might be. Let's see if this wants to. There we go. So the benefits of the Workspace Intelligence is, of course, that what we would like to do is to transform the employee experience, right? To keep talent and focused talent fully active and activated as well, right? As well as increasing business agility and self-service and automation with workflows, right? Because again, even though a pandemic struck right now, there's probably going to be some new disruptive change in the future as well, right? And we need to have a platform where we are capable of actually handling what might come down the road. Another part that we discussed very briefly in all of this is, of course, security. Security becomes one of these key pieces, right? And security is of course, a complex, deep, and broad topic. But this talks about security essentially from a Citrix perspective, right? From a end user perspective and your devices and laptops and access to resources perspective, right? And essentially what we at Citrix see for the future is that you are going to need some sort of multi-layered defense, right? So defense in depth, essentially, right? That enables protections for your users, the devices as well, but the networks, data, apps, browsers, workspace, and all of that has to be protected as well, right? In different layers to be able to provide that important redundancy in security if something or when something malicious happens, rather, right? So the entire Citrix platform kind of reduces risk from phishing attacks. I'm going to show that in the demo very soon. Malware, ransomware attacks, Trojans, of course, the wild web, data theft and data loss, of course, disasters and oopsies is also one of those things, insider threats, and so on, right? So this is essentially our edition of the CIA triad, right? Where we kind of do confidentiality, availability, and integrity in all of this. And as we at Citrix see this, it is a large puzzle, right? Which you, of course, can lay out on the table with multiple vendors and so on. There's nothing saying that you only have to use Citrix, of course, but multiple vendors means multiple points of administrations, higher cost, and so on. So this is most likely not going to be the optimum solution for you, right? So what we at Citrix try to do is to provide you with that one single pane of glass when it comes to the security aspects of your environment, right? So integrate with your existing security ecosystem and to some extent also consolidate other solutions that you might have already running, right? In order for you to actually be able to actually create those layers that I mentioned before. Now, Workspace Access does not only secure access to your internal sanctioned apps, it also secures access to external web and SaaS as well, of course. And that's because, again, we need to safeguard the users, right? We can't require today for all of the users to always be able to identify what's phishing attempts, what's not, and so on, right? Because that's not going to be enumerating from somewhere within your organization, most likely. So we need to provide some sort of architecture, functionality, services that can actually take care of this entire thing for the user. And that's exactly where Citrix Workspace Access comes into the picture. So what I'm going to do is run you through a few demos. So if I could get my screen up on let me just share this. You should be able to see my screen, I hope. There we go, awesome. So this is your workspace from Citrix, right? It is available as an app and on web as well. So it really doesn't matter what device you have. It's always going to look and work the same. But if we start with the web and kind of walk you through what's going on here. Remember, I talked about the activity feed and Workspace Intelligence, and this is my feed for my specific environment, right? And hopefully the screen is large enough so you can actually see that this is an integration from Office 365. This is ServiceNow. Down here, we have SAP SuccessFactors. So these are all information from different systems showing up in my feed, right? So these are important notifications that my environment kind of deems I should be aware of. And if we look into kind of an example of what we could do here, let's have a look at Office 365. In here, somebody sent me a calendar invite for a team meeting, of course. Now Workspace Intelligence is integrated to Office 365. In this case, it is going to show me the details of this specific team meeting. It's going to show me some start dates, the body contents, and so on. And I can actually accept this invite directly from Workspace without having to actually open Office 365 or my email up, right? So that's going to allow me to not have to get out of Workspace to actually get something done. And this goes on. It could be regarding an incident that has been created. In this case, a laptop has crashed, and that's my laptop. Right, and all of the information from all of the different important systems shows up in my feed. But I did also mention we have the static micro apps, right? So let's talk about Salesforce as an example here. Maybe I want to create a lead. Now, if you are not a Salesforce black belt, Salesforce can be somewhat intimidating the first time you're using this. So why not abstract the functionality of creating a lead into the Workspace UI instead? Now, being a man, I can't talk and type at the same time, unfortunately. So give me 2 seconds to just add some details in here. I'm going to create a lead in Salesforce, right? And I don't have to open Salesforce up. I don't have to know how Salesforce works. I don't have to know what the GUI looks like in Salesforce itself, right? I could just do that from the workspace itself. And this would go on and extend to any system or app that you add to the workspace. Now, if we keep on looking through the workspace itself, we have different types of apps available in here as well. So again, it should not matter what type of app I'm trying to access, right? It should just work, and it should just single sign me on. So if I open up a intranet site, this is actually hosted off this network that I'm on right now. This is an internal site. I have no VPNs running and no way to actually access this app normally. But since this is actually provided through Citrix Workspace, we actually get what's called VPN-less access, right? So we get proxying through Citrix Cloud in order to actually reach this site. And as you can see in here, we've also added some security controls around this app. So it's watermarked with my session, my IP, my ID in the session. I can't actually copy and paste information in here. You can see that's grayed out. So I can essentially access those internal apps without having to even start a VPN. And if we talk about SaaS apps again, and let's start Salesforce, and let's start the unsecure edition of Salesforce. I'm also going to start my webmail. The first thing I want you to notice is essentially that we are single sign-on, right? I don't have to sign in again. Now, me personally, I am a millennial, which means I have a passionate hatred for passwords. I just want to be signed in. Passwordless by Microsoft is the best thing since sliced bread, pretty much. And you can see here, we are just signed in, right? There's no issues. I don't have to sign in again or do anything like that. And while we are in Salesforce, let's actually have a look at the leads section in here. Because again, you remember we created that lead in the Workspace UI, in the micro apps. We should then find that lead created in here. So you can see, here's the lead that I created before in the demo. So you can see that that kind of simplifies all of the different access and tasks that you might want to do in different systems. And you don't have to actually understand how the backend system works or what that looks like. This could be essentially any type of app, right? So SaaS apps, internal apps, web apps, Citrix hosted apps, it really doesn't matter. Any app, you can still provide security controls, even though you do not own that application and the backend to that application, you can still provide some sort of security controls around that app. And moving on, you can see that we have all different types of desktops as well. So whether those be Windows virtual desktops or whatever those are, right? For the users that might have requirements to actually work on a full desktop. But the files also follows you along, right? Because that would be the missing piece in this puzzle, right? So if I have different repositories, it might be OneDrive for Business. We might have network shares within the organization that we need to access. All of those would enumerate in Workspace as well, without the need for VPNs or anything. These are just going to show up in here, and I can then interact with the files that I need. If we just briefly go back to the home section here, you're going to see that my feed has also updated with a new notification. So the lead Simon Page has actually been assigned to me, right? And that's, of course, because I created that. So that's the workspace itself. Now, we talked a bit about safeguarding the users and security and so on as well. And this is where secure internet access comes into the picture, right? It's a new service that we offer where we essentially proxy internet connections through our cloud service, which then gives you a lot of capabilities, right? So in here, you can see that this looks like a normal email, right? It looks like a security alert from Google. But this is actually a phishing attempt, right? So you can see what would normally happen, right? When I click one of these links, I would be taken to the site that's within the hyperlink, and that might contain malicious code. But in this case, since this is dynamically assessing the category of the URL I'm trying to reach as an end user, we are going to be able to see that this is actually malicious code. So we're going to notice that this is not something you should access directly on your endpoint. So we are going to actually sandbox and air gap access to this specific site that I'm trying to reach. I just had to start this in incognito for the demo to work this time around. But you're going to see we are connecting to a browser sandbox that is running in Citrix Cloud. So it is essentially an instance of a web browser that runs not with dependencies to my physical device that I'm connecting from. So we are dynamically safeguarding the users from any malicious attacks on them or phishing attempts and so on. And we also have block capabilities as well, right? So maybe I'm trying to access shopping or hacking or whatever the categories that you might want to control. We can then, on any device, control how access to that category works. And there's, of course, a lot of different features and functionality included in here. Data loss prevention, on-the-fly malware scans. There's 1,000,001 pieces in this. And that was pretty much it for the demo. If you want to have more information about all of this, feel free to go visit Simon in the Aero ECS booth, I think, and he should be able to give you some more insights. But just to summarize a bit, how we kind of see this going down the road, the workspace itself is going to have to be device and user agnostic to some extent, right? You shouldn't have to depend on this being a corporate issued laptop, and users will need contextual access to the workspace, and it should essentially look and work the same no matter what location you are trying to connect from. And with regards to the infrastructure, security and multi-hybrid deployments, as well as infrastructure as code, being able to actually deploy these different rebuilded images and so on is going to remain a top priority into the future as well. And when it comes to security, we believe that contextual aware, zero trust networking access, and a layered security approach is going to have to be adopted to provide a good security baseline for your organization to safeguard the users, to safeguard your data centers and your IP, of course. And for the users, this hopefully means that it's actually going to be easier than ever before to actually get work done, right? Because your environment is going to be a bit more optimized than before, while seamlessly being protected on and off the corporate network and devices as well. So that's kind of how we at Citrix see this and where we believe it's heading. It is, of course, a very large topic, what happens next, and the different approaches you might take to what's coming next. But don't hesitate to go talk to Simon if you need more information, of course.